This is Getting Up with Gareth Hall on this Friday morning. It's an exciting Friday because tomorrow we have the Caulfield Cup and the Everest. Dean Evans from Winning Edge Investments joins me now to preview those two great races. Dino, hello to you.
Good morning, Gareth. Great to speak with you this morning. And yeah, absolutely cracking racing this Saturday. Two massive races: the Everest $15 million and the $5 million Story Caulfield Cup, and some capacity fields in both. And wish the weather was a little bit better, but the racing's still very hot.
So Caulfield, it's a drying day in Melbourne. Hopefully today and tomorrow it's fine, but we'll be racing on a heavy track. Has that changed your opinion on this race?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's probably a fair few horses that are dry track horses that you can rule sort of a line through. Some of them like sort of Maximal and Crystal Pegasus and Inspirational Girl and Great House would probably prefer a drier track. So I think it's sort of ruled a few out. But a few of the horses that I was keen on tend to go pretty well on a wet track. So it's sort of solidified my thinking on some of the runners.
So just quickly then, for the punters out there doing their form, what horses do you think that we can definitely put a line through? It's probably likely that Maximo will come out anyway. John O'Shea pointing out that if it's too wet, he'll save that horse hopefully to get a start in a Cox Plate. But Inspirational Girl, I thought she had a bit of a question mark whether she'll handle the heavy, but you think that she might be out of play now because of the ground.
Yeah, I think, she's a Western Australian horse, so they generally don't get too much opportunity to see the wet track. And when she ran in the Doncaster last prep, she'd sort of put in a couple of good runs, winning the Blamey and then in the All-Star Mile, and then was down the track in the Doncaster. So at this point in time, I think being third up over 2,400, which is already a bit of a query for her on the wet track. I'm not too keen on her there. Crystal Pegasus is another one that needs the wet. Great House, I think, generally needs it drier. Crystal Pegasus needs it dry. And Nonconformist is the other one where you just go through his performances and he's never really been on anything on a really wet track, but he seems more of a dry track horse as well. So I think there's a few there where it sort of doesn't really suit them. And even probably Due just doesn't seem to be going particularly well this prep, but I don't think she's really a bold track horse either. So, no, it's going to do two things. It's going to aid those who like the wet track, and it's also going to aid those, obviously, who can really run out the trip.
Let's have a look at the market thanks to Bet365. Gold Trip 13, Duaz at $13, Knight's Order $12, Montefilia at $21. David Payne told me yesterday that she's ready to run a big race and the track shouldn't bother her. And she's getting out to a big price. You got Numerian at 13, Nonconformist at $12, Vow and Declare 26, No Compromise at 21, Allegron at 12, Benno at $9, Great House at 23, Inspirational Girl at 15, Maximal at 26, Sound at $126, Chapada at $61, Crystal Pegasus at 71, the favourite Smoke and Romans, what a story this is, at $4.40, Charlie Rose at $81, Durston 23 and Macram at $34. Dean Evans, what are you doing in this year's Caulfield Cup?
Look, there's one horse in particular that I'm really keen on, and that's Numerian. He's got exceptional form overseas. He beat the Cox Plate winner Sir Dragonet by 2.8 lengths in Ireland on a heavy track. It was a heavy 11 that day, and he bolted in. And he was also beaten ahead by the Cox Plate runner-up Armory on a heavy track in Ireland as well. So he handled the wet. It took a bit of time to acclimatise here in his sort of early time in Australia, but the last prep he won at Group 2 level in Brisbane. He beat Maximal by 2.3 lements. And Maximal then ran second in the Turnbull, beaten 1.4 lengths by Smoke and Romans, who's a Caulfield Cup favourite here. And Numerian's had two runs as prep, running second both times. He ran really strong closing sectionals, first up in the Chelmsford, running second behind Knight's Order. But he sort of ran the ninth quickest last 600 metres of all runners on the day at Randwick there. And then he was second to Cascadian in the Hill Stakes. But that run was sort of better than it looks on paper, even though it was beaten 4 lengths. They ran plus 17 for the first section. And Numerian was up there on the speed. And Cascadian was sort of just smoking its pipe right out the back and was able to run over the top. And Cascadian's a genuine Group 1 weight for age runner who's probably going to be in the Cox Plate. So I think it's really telling that Tommy Berry has given up a lot of rides. He's given up the Everest ride, and he also had Arcado and the Cozzy, who he's won on before in that big race, and other rides in Sydney to come here and ride this horse. And I think the wet track's really going to suit Marion. Even on pacer, I can see him with not a huge amount of pressure here after sort of Knight's Order will lead quite comfortably, and then you've got sort of Charlie Rose, Smoke and Romans and Marion will all be there on speed. And the rest tend to sort of get back. So I just think he's going to get a perfect run. He's got one of the best jockeys in the race, Tommy Berry, and he just profiles really nicely for this race.
So Numerian on top at a great each-way price for Annabelle Neesham and Tommy Berry. And Tommy Berry's been keen to ride this galloper in the Caulfield Cup a long way out. Basically at the start of the spring indicator, that's where he wanted to be on this day. Outside of Numerian, do you give what's your second best? Like a horse like a leg run. We had a chat to James Cummings yesterday, Dean, and he said there shouldn't be, don't worry about the gap in between runs. He did have a temperature before the Turnbull Stakes, but he's a horse that probably can get away with that break because he enjoys the gap in between runs. Do you give him a hope? And then you look at this year's Caulfield Cup and you've got Benno that won a maiden at Nowra, who's only won the one race, and then Gold Trip, who carries top weight at 57.5 despite only being victorious once as well. It's a unique and fascinating Caulfield Cup this year when you look at it that way.
It is, absolutely. And those three are actually the three that I have second, third and fourth. Okay. You've basically nailed them. I think I've got Gold Trip second. He is, a highly touted import. He had exceptional Group 1 form in France, ran fourth in the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. He was a good third when second up in the Naturalism. He had a huge weight. And he was only beaten 2 lengths in the Turnbull. I think it was the run of the race. He was sat 3 wide, no cover. The two big pluses now for him, he gets to 2,400 metres, which is where he's run his peak races overseas, and he gets a wet track where he's also, run his peak races. So it's D-Day for Gold Trip. This is really the race that I think he's there to win, although I'm sure as an overseas horse he'll get better and better, in his coming preparations. I do think this is a big chance for him. A leg run, I'm very pleased to hear that James thinks he's ready to rock. I would have had him, potentially top pick had he run in the Turnbull. I'm concerned that he's third up, but you've only got to take a line through the fact that he ran third up in the Australian Derby last prep on a very heavy Randall track. It was a really big run, and he was only beaten less than a length by Hitotsu and Benno that day. So if James thinks he's perfectly right and it's not a concern, then a leg run is absolutely a huge chance. Benno was an excellent second in the Australian Derby as a 3-year-old on the wet track. Narrowly beaten. He's been set for this. He's going really well. I like that he sort of had 4 runs. He'll be absolutely rock hard fit, and he handles the wet. So he's a big chance too. My concerns are probably, he's drawn out barrier 20. He's going to get a long way back. He's going to have a lot of good horses to run past on that really heavy track. And Regan Bayliss is sort of new to Caulfield and Melbourne. He hasn't done much riding at the Caulfield track. So that's probably why I've got Benno fourth. Just so I think he's going to have to do a lot more work and than some of the other horses. But they're all good chances. And then you got Smoking Romans is the favourite, who I just have to bet around. It's quite incredible. Exactly 365 days ago to Saturday, he ran second to a hurdler in a midweek at BM84, and now he's a Caulfield Cup favourite. And you look at the weights and measures. He has the ticks in terms of the trainer, the jockey, the prep, and the weight. But I think he's won 2 sort of walk-a-thon races so far this prep, and he's going to see more pressure here. And I'm just struggling to back a horse like Smoke and Romans at sort of $4.50, $4.80 in the Caulfield Cup. I have to bet around him.
It's an amazing game, this thoroughbred game. 6 months ago, 6 months is a long time in racing. You had Duaz doing what she did in a Tancred and Australian Cup. You had Montefiore going straight past Very Elegant in a Group 1 over 2,000 metres at Rose Hill. And now those 2 horses are the outsiders behind Smoke and Romans. You just told us about his journey. Benno, that's only won the one race, and that was at Nowra and a maiden. Gold Trip, albeit he's finished 4th at an Arc, but he's only had the one success as well. It can be a game that you think, how does that happen? But it's going to be a great race tomorrow in the Caulfield Cup. We might take a quick break. This is Giddy Up with Gareth Hall on this Friday. We are previewing the big races tomorrow with one of the very best in the business, Steen Evans from Winning Edge Investments. And for the SEN listeners out there, all you need to do, and you're backing winner already, head to Winning Edge Investments. And if you go to the promotions page, you just type in SEN and you will get 50% for the rest of your life off for the membership. So if you do that, you are backing a winner already. We'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll preview the Everest straight after this. You're listening to Giddy Up on this Friday with Gareth Hall. Dean Evans from Winning Edge Investments is with me as we start to preview the Everest. It's race 7 at Randwick tomorrow, and having a look at the Bet365 market. Geez, he's been backed heavily in the last 24 hours. Nature Strip. You could have got around 250 with Bet365. He's now into $2. Eduardo 11. Lost and Running 750. Mars Crusader at 12. Marsu at 17. Private Eye at $13. Overpass at 50 to 1. Ingratiating at $51. Joyful Fortunes out the gate of $71. Shades of Rose at $51, Jackano at $11, and Giga Kick at $23. The Emergencies Forbidden Love at 100 to 1, Apache Chase $151, Kementari 80 to 1, and In the Congo at $101. Geez, this has been a good go for Nature Strip. He's been heavily supported here. Your thoughts on the market now, Dean?
Yeah, well, look, Nature Strip is on the TJ Smith and the Autumn Everest track distance 3 years in a row, vaulting in over Eduardo last year. Won the Everest, obviously, last year. Got a couple of VRC sprints, Amora Galaxy and the Kingstown Ascot. So, he's the best sprinter in the world. He's been set for this. The rain affected tracks are positive. And his 2 runs as prep, I think, have been better than probably ahead of the Everest and the TJ Smith last year. So, the horse is flying. He gets a wet track that suits him. It's hard to knock him as a horse. I think the one interesting thing here is, there's definitely going to be plenty of speed. You've got Eduardo and Joyful Fortune, who I think are really going to push forward and press for the lead. Nature Strip's drawn out wide there in the outside gate in 12. And then you've got sort of horses like Shades of Rose, Overpass, and Marzu, who are also going to want to be handy. But if any of them jump well, then they could be right up there too. So, it's just going to be interesting if a couple of horses do decide they really want to push forward. And we know Nature Strip can be slow away, and we know that he likes to sort of dominate and lead. But if they kick up inside him and he just has to do quite a bit of work to get to the front, then there's some pretty strong horses who like to close here. And we do need to remember that Nature Strip, he won the Everest last year, but he only won it by sort of a neck. And had horses like Mars Crusader really eating into the line late. So, he's going to have some quality horses chasing after him in Lost and Running, Mars Crusader and Jacquino. And I think that's going to make it a really intriguing race if they go as quickly as I hope in front.
What's his right price, Dean, then, Nature Strip? Because I agree with you a little bit. I don't think the speed map's going to be too kind for him, especially when you've got the Bjorn Baker trained gallopers that need to be on pace. Mark Newnham has told us as well during the week that their first option will be to lead with Joyful Fortune. Eduardo will be trying to own that race outside the leader. I would imagine Marzu, they rode him too pretty the other day, so they would probably want to make it hard for Nature Strip as well. So what price should he be? And after 200 to 300 metres, where do you think James McDonald will be?
I think 64 is about his right price, and I think $2.50 is probably a fair price. I think $2 is very short in a race of this quality and depth, and given them that position. Whilst if it was $3, it would be sort of bet. But I think around $2.50 is a great price. I think a lot's going to come down to how well Nature Strip jumps. He can jump sort of their way. The outside gate's actually an advantage for him because he can just sort of use that sort of high cruising speed. Even when he's slow away, he picks him up pretty quickly and gets into the right position. But when he's won his races, the Everest and the TJ Smith, he's either led or set outside the leader. What was interesting though was he was able to come from sort of third, fourth in the shorts after he was slow away, and sat behind them and blew them away. So I've always sort of felt that he could do that, and he's never really needed to. But I do think there's a potential that Eduardo and Joyful Fortune kick up. and then, a lot will depend on how hard they push forward on Marzu, as you spoke about, and Shades of Rose and Overpass. And then James is going to have to make a decision. I think he's potentially going to have to decide whether he, pushes forward from that 3-wide position, whether he's actually happy to sit out 3 wide, depending on how the track's playing, or whether he actually takes his fifth and sort of settles fourth and the 1 out, 1 back slots in there and is prepared to then run past them. But, in that scenario, he doesn't sort of get to dominate and bully them like he has previously. And, does that mean that the dangers that I think that the two of them, like Lost and Running, Mask Crusader and Jacquinot, have the potential to run them down.
All right, then we'll play this game, Dino, if it's okay. $50. If I gave you $50, how are you investing it in the Everest?
Look, Lost and Running's a horse I've been keen on really since last year. He ran fourth in this race last year, beaten 2 lengths when he was inexperienced. It's really important to note that both Classique Legend and Nature Strip were unplaced in their first Everest before winning it in the subsequent year. And last year before the Everest, he ran fourth in the Premier, beaten 1.5 lengths, and this year he won it, rating substantially better. So I think the horse is flying. I think he looks a really strong chance here. And Mask Crusader was an unlucky second to Nature Strip in the TJ Smith and the Everest last year. He didn't come up in the spring, but he was a good third in the Premier, so he's getting back to his best. I think he'd prefer it drier, but I still think he's a chance here. And, Jacquinot, the Golden Rose winner, yes, came off a close second in the Golden Rose to win this. And I think he's right there in the mix as well. I think if you had $50, I'd be taking on Nature Strip at the $2. At the moment, I'd probably be having 30 on Lost and Running, who I do think is the big danger in Nature Strip. I'm probably having 10 on Mask Crusader and Jacquinot as well, because I think if the speed gets poured on as much as it looks on paper, then Nature Strip's going to have to do a bit of work, and then it could be a very exciting finish. I think if something beats him, it's not going to beat him far, but at the prices, he did sort of fall in the Everest last year, and he's going to have to be better this year as an 8-year-old, I think, to win this one.
We'll have a quick look at the Silver Eagle before we say goodbye. Mr. Mozart, $3.80. Star Tonte, $6.50. Valana, $9 with Bet 365. And then you go down to Lock Eagle at $11. Waterford at $6. And Espiona at $6.50. Jimmy the Bear at $16. How do you assess the Silver Eagle now?
Look, I think a big part of it's just going to be how the track's playing. We did see it very leader biased last week, and we saw that sort of Queen Elizabeth Day in the autumn as well when it gets really heavy. Hoping there's no rain sort of today and tomorrow, and then it might be a bit more of a fairer track. If it's a fair track and they're running on, I do think Star Tontes is the one to beat. She got beaten those in the Surround Stakes on a heavy track. This track distance as a 3-year-old, and then she won the Tats Tiara in her last run in Brisbane last prep. The 2 runs of this prep, I think you can forgive them both. Her sectionals are outstanding. She ran the second quickest last 400 metres in her first up run, despite being beaten to the 2.3 lengths. And then last start, she was beaten 4 lengths, but she was held up, pretty much the last 150 metres and never got a clear run, and still ran the quickest last 600 to 200 metre sectional of all runners on the day. So that sort of showed how well she's going. So I think she's flying. She handles a wet track. And if the track's playing fair, I really think Star Tontes is the one to beat. I think if it's on speed, then you've really got to look at horses like Mr. Mozart, who's just a tough on pace, who maps sort of nicely here. Won the Doncaster Prelude last prep, beating Our Playboy, and then won the Hawkesbury Guineas on the far lap as well. And was a good second sort of first up to Kiku. So he's probably the key danger. And if it's on speed, the other one, the Lavish Girl, who was second in the 1,000 Guineas Prelude first up, and won the Angus Armanasco over this distance last prep. So I think it's going to really depend on how the track's playing. The other interesting one is Espiona, that wasn't going to run in this race last week. I think if it's the backmarkers race, and it's the other one that I think it's just not a Rosehill horse. You look at its form at Rosehill, and it just doesn't seem to enjoy its home track. But her best runs have certainly been at Randwick, and her best runs have certainly been once she's got to 1400 as well. So if they're running on, Star Tontes and Espiona. If they're on pace, Mr. Mozart or Lavish Girl, and I'll be betting essentially based on how the track's playing by that race.
And just before we let you go, Dino, there's a few text messages coming through. Gareth, can you ask Dean for his $50 staking plan for the Caulfield Cup? Which way would you go there?
Given the uncertainties, I'd be having 25 each way Numerian.
Yeah.
I still think Gold Trip needs to prove itself, even though it's my second pick. Allegron's had that little setback, and Benno's got the wide draw, and my most confident pick is just, I think Numerian really is there to run a big race, and I'd be having 25 each way on him.
And I can give you $13 and $4 at the place for Numerian in the Caulfield Cup. Dino, great work, and of course, Winning Edge Investment. So what do the SEN listeners need to do to get the 50% discount for a lifetime membership?
Just up to winningedgeinvestments.com, go to membership options, select whichever service I think suits them best, and type in SEN, and that's a 50% ongoing lifetime discount for them for that first membership.
Sensational, mate. Enjoy your day. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Gareth. Appreciate it.
Great to catch up with Dean Evans. It's news time.
Sometimes needing new tyres can catch us by surprise. That's why Tyre Power gives you the power of Zip Pay and Zip Money. You can get what you need now, get back on the road safely and pay for it later. Terms and conditions apply. So visit tyrepower.com.au or call 13 21 91.